Sophocles' audience would have been aware of the story of Oedipus's encounter with the Sphinx as a part of the legend that precedes the action of Oedipus the king. This story offers some insight into the nature of the character of Oedipus and his fate. According to the legend, the Sphinx was oppressing the city of Thebes with its riddle. The question it posed was as follows: what goes on 4 legs in the morning, on 2 at midday, and on 3 in the evening? The answer is a human being, since as infants in the morning of life, humans crawl on all 4s, and then at noon, the midday of life, they walk on 2 legs, and then in the evening of life, they walk assisted by a cane, so to speak, on 3 legs. The Sphinx is a monster, a creature of nature, and not a human being, but it poses its riddle to human beings, the people of Thebes. In a sense, it's a kind of trick question, since the Sphinx asks human beings about themselves. They should know the answer since they are human beings and they know what it means to be one. It's thus, in a sense, a question of self-knowledge and the knowledge of what it is to be human. By answering the question correctly, Oedipus shows that he's seen through the ruse and understands the self-referential nature of the question. It refers to himself as a human being. But there's a hidden irony in this, since he's precisely unknowing with regard to self-knowledge. He does not know who he really is, being tragically ignorant of his real parents and lineage. The importance of understanding what it is to be human was a key feature in Greek cultural life. The question of self-knowledge that was raised by the Sphinx was an important motif. The maxim, "Know thyself," gnothe se auton, was written on the oracle at Delphi. This saying is discussed several times by Socrates in Plato's dialogues. It shows an increasing awareness of the separation of the human from nature. There's something specific about human nature that needs to be identified and defined. The demand to know oneself can be interpreted in different ways. Specifically, it can refer to knowledge about oneself as a particular person, but can also refer to knowledge of oneself as a member of the species of human beings. It's precisely the ambiguity of these two meanings that makes the irony in the case of Oedipus possible. He has great knowledge about human beings in general, but yet he's ignorant about himself as an individual. This ability to think of oneself as a part of a wider species is one of the things that defines what it is to be human. This is what the 19th century German thinkers Ludwig Feuerbach and Karl Marx meant with the term species being. Humans can abstract from themselves as individuals and understand the human race as such. This ability to abstract from the individual case is what makes science possible. We see a number of individual things or a set of phenomena, and the scientific mind finds a pattern or a law that they all have in common. Science discerns the universal, but in doing this, it must leave the perspective of the individual. This is good for science, but it can be problematic for the individual when carried to an extreme. This is where Oedipus falls short, since he neglects himself in his drive towards knowledge. He knows the universal answer, a human being, but he has no self-knowledge. In his exchange with Tiresias, the seer rebukes him that he does not know who he really is. Today, we're all familiar with the stereotype of someone who might be a great genius in science, but who's lacking in more fundamental areas of personal development. Just having a lot of factual knowledge is not enough to make for a complete person. Despite our modern affirmation of science, we also still recognize there are certain human qualities that should not be neglected in our striving for knowledge. In the ancient world, an important part of knowing oneself was knowing one's limitations as a human being. It was the mark of arrogance to presume to be like the gods. This was a moral dimension of the issue that we saw in the stories of the fall in the Tower of Babel. By wishing to know everything, Oedipus is trying to be like the god Apollo, who represents intelligence and truth. Among Apollo's symbols is light, which is associated with wisdom and knowledge. Apollo is also referred to as Phoebus, which means the bright one. Since Oedipus presumes to be like him, it makes sense that Apollo punished him. Oedipus's overestimation of his own knowledge is a sign of hubris. He believes that he has knowledge beyond what is apportioned to human beings. Despite his pride in his own knowing, Oedipus has utterly failed to carry out the command of Apollo to know himself.